Hey guys.
Yo, yo.
So we are coming to you from Spain. We have 2 days left before we head to Mexico for 3 months, which I'm really excited about. The building that we're staying in is neighboring a building that is being, I don't know, like,
It sounds demolished.
I think it's getting demolished hammer by hammer. I don't know if you can hear it right now, but it's happening.
Renovations, the joys of it. Both as the neighbor and as the person who's having the renovations done.
Well, we freaking work from home and we do a lot of recordings, so it is extra annoying for us.
Rude.
So rude. Don't they know we're trying to work? Anyways, how are you, listeners? Really? Did he? And then what did you say? Oh.
You said did he? I thought you said Diddy. And I was like, who's Diddy?
Diddy's your friend's dog.
Didier. I believe Didier is the man who died with Princess Diana.
Really?
I think so. Is that right? Have I just embarrassed myself?
I don't know what his name was, so I cannot confirm or deny. You should just feel embarrassed as just a default setting.
When we're back in the land of the Queen that was, we'll suss that out.
We will. So today's episode is a goodie. I don't know if you've heard it before. We're going to give you a replay only because was it the last episode that we released with Josh McIntosh?
James McIntosh.
Fuck's sake. Sorry, James McIntosh. We spoke about the importance of injury management. Now, this episode that we're replaying for you is way back when we started. I think it was like episode 4 with Dr. Nathan Kelly, who's actually our osteopath when we lived on the Gold Coast. And this was an episode covering pain, really. And he spoke about the biopsychosocial model of pain, what pain means, what it might not mean, how to manage it, when we should seek attention for it, when we might not. And yeah, it seemed timely, it's important. It was an awesome discussion. And we actually look forward to having Nathan back on the podcast at some stage. So Nathan, if you're listening, please come back on the podcast. I'm begging you.
I think this is the first time we actually introduced the biopsychosocial model to me.
Okay.
And since then, it popped up everywhere. And I've even now referenced it multiple times, even just talking to clients about the whole concept around the biological, the social, and the psychological, and how it's all intertwined and interacts. And it's really, really, really cool concept. So that alone, I think, was a big learning curve for me on that one. And the pain stuff was obviously unreal too. So
it was. Without further ado, we present to you this episode.
Welcome back, everyone. We are here on another Flex Success podcast. I think number 5. I think so. And
lucky number.
Yeah, very lucky number. I'm also here, obviously, with the lovely partner of mine, Liz. And today we're joined by industry professional, surfing connoisseur, and just all-around good guy, Nathan Kelly, an osteopath on the Gold Coast.
That Dean and I both have experience with, actually. We see Nathan personally for our aches and pains.
And he has touched both of us in places that neither of us have touched ourselves.
It's true. Just the magic fingers.
Where only the brave go.
So Nathan, we'll ask you to introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Well, thank you very much for the lovely introduction that you've done. As you said, I'm an osteopath. I'm based on the Gold Coast. I run a private practice called Universal Health and Performance in Burleigh Heads. My practice is a bit of a mix between quite an active population and then just some general pop. Within that active population, I happen to see a lot of strength athletes, bodybuilders, powerlifters, CrossFitters, like all of that sort of stuff. And then I mix that with quite a few surfers and a few sort of professional and semi-professional athletes from some of the other domains as well.
I was listening to a podcast that you recorded with another podcast show, and you mentioned that you really like working with athletes or barbell athletes because they give more of a shit than Sarah from The Office and are more willing to put time into their rehab. And as coaches, we can fully appreciate working with someone that cares a lot more as opposed to trying to work with someone that doesn't give a shit. So totally hear you there.
Absolutely. I often sort of think it's quite funny because one of my hobbies, as you just mentioned, is surfing. And so naturally I treat quite a large population of surfers from the Gold Coast, who are stereotypically probably some of the least motivated sports people in the world. And then I complement that with bodybuilders and strength athletes who are probably some of the most dedicated and, you know, willing to participate in rehab, you know, recovery, improving their performance, all of that sort of stuff. So it's a really nice sort of dichotomy that I get to frustrate myself with surfers and then get really good results with bodybuilders.
And do you think that purely comes down to the vanity of the barbell athlete, knowing that they'll look better if they're pain-free?
Well, let's not call it
absolutely
vanity-driven a barbell athlete.
Oh, that's true. Well, let's not call them athletes. I know, I think I might piss a few people off here, but I do like to say that bodybuilders are muscular beauty pageant competitors.
It's true.
And just,
there we go.
Yeah, the idea of beauty is a little different there.
Yeah. I'm sure you could also get the flip on that too, though. The neuroticism involved with a bodybuilder is probably also the same with, they're like, oh my God, I'm always sore. Like, what, I've got this niggle, and then they're just constantly worried about problems all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So where you've got some people who are like, you know, completely nonchalant, and that might be the surfers who could pretty much be walking around with a broken leg and are like, I don't need to see anyone, versus a bodybuilder who might have a paper cut and comes and sees me thinking that their arm is going to fall off with necrosis or something like that. A bit of an exaggeration, but sometimes you do get those extremes. Absolutely.
Oh, that's
Paper
funny.
cuts hurt more than they should.
Paper cuts do hurt a lot.
Got a good analogy about paper cuts that we might get to later when we start talking about some pain.
Yeah, so today's topic is pain, and something that all of us experience. And Nathan thought this would be a good topic to unwrap so that we can understand it a bit better and be a bit less shit. But actually, before we get there, so you've explained who you are and what you do, but why do you do it?
Oh, good question. I think I've always had a bit of an urge just to help people. Even, you know, right the way through my, you know, junior schooling career and things like that, I always found myself to be a bit of an empath, I guess, and was always, you know, drawn towards the want to help or improve people. That might sound a bit cliche, but it's definitely what pushed me to where I am. And then mixing that, you know, with my own various injuries and wanting to learn more about the body, how it works, and just always striving, you know, down that path of questioning and looking at the way that I think things are and the way that things really are, and sort of mixing those two together, which can be, you know, sometimes at opposite ends.
Yeah. God, we're an interesting machine, aren't we?
Yes.
Body.
We don't make sense. We don't make sense at all.
And the other crazy thing is, like, what you learn in theory is almost like not even true sometimes in practice. We were joking about this with Dalton the other day. Well, not joking, but talking and discussing about, you do an anatomy class and you're like, what? That doesn't look like anything in the textbook. You know, like, how could that possibly all be put together? Like, you look at a forearm or a lower limb or anything, you're just like, that is an absolute mess.
Well, I did anatomy at uni, right? And Dean worked with cadavers in first year. I didn't work with cadavers because I started with a Bachelor of Chiropractic Science and then later switched to Social Science. So I only completed the first year of my chiro. And in first year at Macquarie Uni, we didn't work with cadavers. But anyways, Dean did. And looking at textbooks, you know, you see a heart or a liver or whatever. And in our exams, we had to walk around and play with the plastic mannequins. And it had a little label like, name this. But Dean got to like open people up, and I'm sure a liver didn't look like my beautiful plastic being.
Well, no, I can never remember. But, you know, not everyone has the same amount of muscles in their forearm, and one of them's missing. And then, like, sometimes you're like counting it through, and you're like, what the fuck? That's not even in the textbook. What is that? And they're like, oh, there's a small percentage of people that have that one.
Well, Dean has an extra rib.
Like, no, I do.
That's weird.
There you go. We've just got such a wide, you know, the human body has such a wide variance of normal. Like, you know, we think that normal is this one, like, linear pathway, but really there's like, it's, you know, 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall, and that's where normal fits in. And there's, like, you know, all encompassing, basically.
I often like to say that the average person has one tit and one nut.
Yeah.
So if we average humans out, it's true.
I think that's, you know, like a part of what, you know, can be really challenging as far as what you're talking about there. And then you relate that to people like us who look and read research, is that even just like looking at the research, it doesn't give you necessarily a clear path or an answer. It gives you maybe a framework to look at, and then you have to use your own critical thinking and judgment to sort of decipher how we sort of hone that down to relate that to an individual. And I think that goes the same for an anatomy textbook. You know, it does. You've got to look at that and the piece of paper, and then look at the person in front of you and decide, how am I going to piece that puzzle together? And that's the devil's in the detail there for sure.
Yeah. In nutrition and training, we always like refer to it when I've done seminars with Real Crozier of those that are like legitimate practitioners understand the principles, apply their own protocols. Whereas those that are sort of desktop, you know, warriors that think they know everything, they basically take protocols and just parrot them. So they only have the opportunity, or the ability, I should say, to basically apply one set of protocols to all people, because they don't really understand the ins and outs. Whereas, like you said, like when you understand all of the bits and pieces, it's the fun and the art, and the coach and the true practitioner is the person that's in practice, taking everything they've learned from a principle basis and applying it in practice.
That's it. That's a really good point. It really is. You know, I think coaching and, you know, like being a practitioner, there's a science and there's an art, as you just mentioned. You know, it's a really good mix of the two, and you can't just be all science. I don't think you can just be all art. Some people might like to be. But, you know, like mixing those two together, it truly does make a great coach and a great clinician. Yep.
Just takes a little bit more energy, which not everyone's willing to give, which is why the industry is not saturated with great coaches.
That's true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Now give us an intro to pain. I know that's a very general ask, but tell us, what would our listeners need to start with to start understanding pain, what it is, how to determine the type?
Yeah, what's exactly
what it is. Yeah.
All that jazz.
Sure. So I might start by sort of like thinking, like getting to describe what the general notion of pain is, and contrasting that with a bit more of a nuanced sort of version that myself and lots of other practitioners have been working off for quite a long time now. So the typical way that we've looked at it, and we'll call this the biomedical model, and that is that there is a linear relationship between pain and damage. So if I cut you, yes, there is damage. But we have quite a new version of this now, in that pain does not always equal damage. Sometimes we've got outside influences that can associate with pain and go on to create pain for longer than we would like due to some of those. And we call that the biopsychosocial model. So if we go back to this, you know, typical biomedical model, that's where, you know, a lot of GPs and maybe just your average person on the street is thinking about how things work in their body. And as I said, you know, like sometimes if maybe you bend over and you feel a bit of a twinge in your back, and your brain immediately goes, something must be damaged. But we now know from lots of studies and lots of imaging and things like that, that most of those experiences are not really related to damage, but maybe in part to damage, and then maybe in part to how your brain thinks about that, what your psychology is, and then everything that you've had leading up to that. So your past experiences, your culture growing up, your support networks, your environment, all of those sorts of things. So it is a really sort of complex, multimodal, multifactorial approach that we now take to pain, instead of this sort of like one linear approach. And I think it's a really, really important thing that general population and coaches and other trainers and other allied health professionals really need to start thinking about, because we so often just fall back into this biological model.
Totally. So you called it the biosocial model, right?
Biopsychosocial?
Biopsychosocial.
Right.
Yep.
So that would be sort of biological, sociological, and psychological, right? The combination of the three. Yeah, cool. Can I give an example of what I think might be relevant to what you're saying, just so listeners can get an example of that? So as a personal trainer, now online coach, but I was a personal trainer, I used to train all sorts of people, from someone who has a desk job to someone who's a really competitive athlete. And I found those who are really competitive athletes versus the desk job person that's never trained before, they can't distinguish between when your muscles are hurting from an exercise and that's okay, to muscles hurt, I have to stop, it's an emergency. And I found that absolute beginners were like, oh, no. Like they just wouldn't push because they felt like they were doing something bad. They were going to tear a muscle, or like their limb was going to fall off or something, when they started to feel a bit of pain during a set. Whereas someone who's been training for a while, they almost want and embrace that feeling as part of their, part of their therapy of training, perhaps. Would that be a good example of...
that is a really good example. Yeah. And I think, probably what you're getting towards there is, the difference between actual damage and just sensitivity.
Yeah.
And the untrained, as you said, people with like a really like young training history, and they don't really understand the difference between the two. Their protector meter, we'll call it, just kind of goes off at the first sign of what's this? I haven't experienced it before. For someone with a really long training age, like someone like yourselves, that you felt it before, and so your past experience tells you this isn't bad. This happens every time I train, and I know I will recover from this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could we also then draw that parallel and suggest that perhaps someone with an advanced training age could have a decreased ability to sense legitimate pain versus the perception of it's just normal pain?
Because lots of bodybuilders and powerlifters really injure themselves and they're like, no, it's fine.
Yeah. I'm trying to almost think, like, I know when they look at even, I've seen a cool little representation of pain and the association of pain being too much to women that have either had a baby versus women that have not been through pregnancy yet. And the perception of pain and their pain threshold heightens astronomically post-pregnancy than what it does pre-pregnancy, because their experience or their exposure, I should say, to pain prior to pregnancy has been relatively low, let's say, in comparison to pregnancy. So women as well to an intermediate to advanced lifter, I wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think sort of what you'd be looking at there is, as you said, is just like how adapted someone's system is to that pain, and you can certainly push that further towards and improve their envelope of function, what we sort of refer that to, and you can certainly expand that, like quite a lot for some of those people. And it does, for some athletes, become a bit of a problem because they've got quite a wide envelope of function. But typically, like they also do get to know the difference between good pain and bad pain in some cases. But pain plays tricks on us, as like it sometimes it's really, really bad for something quite small, and then sometimes it's something that's quite small, but it gives us a whole shit ton of pain.
And that was the paper cut example that you were talking about before.
There we go.
It really hurt, but it's really not that bad.
Yeah. So like, I cut you with paper and it's the tiniest little cut, or you stub your toe, that hurts. But it's like, sort of what's happened, and you can look at it and you can assess the damage, and you're like, that's just a paper cut. It's going to hurt like crazy for 30, 40 seconds, and then it calms right down. So that's a good example of, like a whole bunch of sensitivity, but not much damage. Yeah, good one.
What would be an example of something not being too painful, but really causing a lot of damage?
Something not too painful, but causing a lot of damage.
Not being relevant to the damage, maybe.
Okay, sure. We see this quite a lot in lumbar spine imaging. So we know you can see quite a large amount on an MRI or an X-ray of lumbar spine degeneration, disc bulges, and disc herniations, and it looks really nasty on that scan. But you can have basically next to no pain. There's no guarantee that style of what we call damage is going to create a painful experience. It could predispose someone to it, but until, let's say their function has been sort of exceeded by, what they want to do, it probably isn't going to cause pain. But that's probably a good one, is that, lots of those spinal degeneration, spinal disc herniations, we find them in the painful and non-painful population almost identically.
Yeah, right. Hey, so I was going through this book recently called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a book about stress and unpacking the impacts on stress on the human body. Even though it sounds like a children's book, it's not. And the book was talking about some people who were born without the perception of pain. And although we might go, oh, how good's that? They'll never feel pain. They're actually really susceptible to injuries because they might have their hand on a hot stove, but they don't feel the pain. So they're like all their skin fries off, for example. What is going on there? How, like, I haven't quite gotten to the place that it explains why they can't feel pain. Is that something you can explain to me?
That is definitely like outside of my scope of practice, that one. But there is like quite a large disconnect, obviously, between what their spinal cord is sensing and the messages that it's sending up to the brain. So
Right.
they're not getting, you know, a lot of that reflexive sort of afferent signals going back up to the brain. But that's something you'd probably need to speak to a neuroscientist or something like that one about as to the actual pathophysiology of that.
Yeah.
But it's a good example of, we actually need pain. Pain is a good thing. It's our alarm system. You know, pain can tell you that something is wrong. It doesn't, as we're just explaining, it doesn't always tell you how much or how bad. So in the instance of a paper cut, it goes off like crazy, but it doesn't tell, and it makes you think that there's a lot of damage, but there really isn't.
Yeah.
So it can tell you, like a smoke alarm, that there's, you know, it thinks that there's a fire, but there could just be smoke. There could not even be smoke. Sometimes your smoke alarm goes off for no bloody good reason. Just
Sometimes this is just cooking toast.
yeah, exactly right.
I like to think of myself as an efficient cook. So I turn the heat right up so it cooks faster.
That's why Australians barbecue. Man, fast.
Should be going hard. But hopefully that's not your approach to training, that you're not just hitting like 9-10 RPE every time. Just like, I'm going to be really efficient here.
Well, I think that's the reason that I'm not injured very often, because I don't train hard enough.
And then again,
that's my excuse.
That's an exposure issue. Being so like far up I suppose the pecking order, like having a real go. So now,
I've been there and done that.
Your regression is still most people's like.
I used to train balls to wall, mainly because I used exercise as a way to de-stress. And God, I feel like I had a lot of stress in my life. So I just trained so hard, and man, I just got to the point where I was just so fatigued and I just couldn't recover from what I was doing. And I had so many aches and pains. But anyways, life's easier now and I just train moderately.
Nice. You live and you learn.
Yeah.
Pain has taught you something there.
It has.
Pain then, Nathan, is like a proxy for potentially seeking someone's advice, or just like going about it and just recognizing it as something that's occurring and like it's there, but don't worry about it.
When should we seek?
Yeah, like how can we, because like you're saying, like pain isn't necessarily damage, you know, like I can come in and I can see you and I can not have, from what I can tell, muscular damage or a tear or anything like that. But then there's obviously moments within a treatment where there's extreme pain because you're manipulating something that's obviously not quite how it's supposed to be. But then obviously that pain then potentially even provides me with relief later on. So like,
when do we know to be a practitioner and when not to?
When you should seek help, is that what you're saying around pain? Well, I guess if you have to ask yourself the question, like, do I need to see someone? That's probably a good time that yes, you do, because pain left wondering can lead us down the lane of what we call catastrophization, and that is not good for pain. If you're constantly thinking about your injury and wondering if it's bad and potentially like spiraling out of control in your head, that is going to increase pain like quite significantly. So I would suggest that if you have to ask, you should probably go and get it assessed and at least get your mind put at ease. Or, you know, if it is really bad, then, you know, it's good because you've got someone to help, you know, rehab you and give you some advice on how you can manage that best. So outside of that, the sort of red flaggy sort of ones maybe is what you're thinking of, would be pain that you can't sort of train through, or you can't titrate anything down to a comfortable level. Pain that's keeping you awake at night is never a good one. you know, like that really persistent pain that just sort of doesn't go away.
Oh, like
and
him having a partner? Can I come
you
see
need to
you?
do someone about that, Liz.
We do come and see you together. I would just call it couples counselling.
It is couples therapy. I think that's part of what I do is, you know, like I'm sort of, you know, like mediating between you two. No.
You're my ongoing pain that keeps me awake at night, Dean. Go.
But yeah, certainly there are things like that. I guess if you have to question it, sometimes just, you know, you need to listen to your gut too. Like if something doesn't feel right, then go and get it assessed, basically. Don't leave yourself wondering, you know, maybe this could be nothing and I can just push through it, or maybe it's not. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, then certainly go and get it looked at, basically.
And worst case, you've spent a few bucks and it's nothing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you get a diagnosis that it's nothing, or nothing too much to worry about, and you get, you know, hopefully with a good practitioner, you get someone who can sort of guide you to like the steps you should take to help calm that down and sort of reintegrate back into your normal activities. Because the longer that you are left out of your activities, once again, a bit like catastrophization, if you stop doing your regular things because of pain, that then has a negative feedback loop into pain because they're part of your coping mechanisms.
Absolutely. So I have seen many practitioners in my time. And what I loved about like our sessions with you, Nathan, is that you did give me active intervention or homework or exercises to do outside of our sessions to deal with my ongoing pain. And for those listening, my ongoing pain was my extremely selfish and overactive traps that were always tight, so much so that when Dean and I were in Europe, I couldn't even carry a handbag. Dean would have to hold my bag because any weight, could deadlift like a champion. I could do stuff in the gym. I would pay for it later. But in my everyday life, I was so limited in the things that I could do. And practitioners in the past, you know, given me an adjustment, given me a massage, done some needling. Okay, we'll see you every week for the next 10 weeks. And nothing really worked. There were theories and whatever. But when I came to see you, you gave me things to practice outside, and it took 2 sessions. And the pain that was every single day, most hours of the day, I don't even think about it anymore. Maybe every 3rd day, I might get a little reminder and then it goes away because I'm on top of my rehab work. So I really loved that about our sessions. And I can say firsthand how, I won't say destructive, how much ongoing pain interrupts someone's life. Even just trying to focus when I'm writing an email. Like, why would I be in pain when I'm writing an email? I'm 30 years old and healthy. Like, it seems ridiculous. It's like getting on top of your pain, even though I always said to myself, oh, it's fine, it's manageable, because I wrote it off because I felt like I've tried, there's nothing I can do about it. It is very disturbing.
Yeah, but that was an interesting one too, because most people, I think, associate pain with the necessity then to either rest or regress. Whereas Liz actually had to progress training into traps.
Yeah.
So she was extremely strong through them.
And they're meaty. They're large, meaty traps.
But posturally,
you know, well-defined traps.
Yeah, so what Nathan got me to do was actually work on my trap strength, because I ended up avoiding deadlifts, avoiding, you know, lunges where I was holding dumbbells in my hands. Instead, I would put a barbell on my back. Like anything that would aggravate my traps, I would avoid. But in the end, Nathan got me working my traps more, which seemed counterintuitive to me, but it worked.
And that was a great deal of faith on your behalf, you know, like, because I remember I could see your brain ticking over when I said to you, I want you to go and do some isometric trap strength work.
Yeah.
I could see you being like, okay, all right, what's this prick doing? They're sore. What do you want me to train them for? Every time I train them, they hurt. And it's actually, you know, like, this is actually quite a nice example of probably what we could say might be tissue sensitivity, but not tissue damage. And it is, especially in the upper traps, it's one that I look at a lot for people. I don't always get the amount of success that I had straight away as I did with you. And that is fantastic that we did. And there's probably a few parts, and A, that you just trusted me and you did the work. And B, that we got our hypothesis right, you know, within 1 or 2 sort of goes at it. And it's not always that way. When you're talking about long-standing, long-term pain, you look down a few different avenues, and it's, you know, like within the best of our educated ability, it is a little bit of trial and error. But we just happen to hit the nail on the head, you know, like fairly quickly. And I remember having that conversation with you that we're going to try this, and if that doesn't work, we're going to try this, and then if that doesn't work, then we're going to try this. So there's always, you know, a few different ideas that you can sort of lead people down, but we just happened to get there quite quickly for you, which I think was really nice. But that sensitivity of the traps, it comes in part that, like, you're training it, you know, for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden they're sore. So you go, okay, I'm not going to train them anymore because they're really sensitive. And then so maybe what happens is that you might train them once every 3 weeks. And so slowly but surely you are deconditioning, and it can be any part of your body, but for you it was your traps, I would say. You were deconditioning them to the amount of stress that you were wanting them to handle. And then that crossed over not only from training, but to just sitting at a desk. Because that's sort of like, you know, that you would feel that sort of pull of your shoulders coming down. And as you said, like a handbag on there would go on to increase its sensitivity as well. So the approach that I took for you was just literally desensitizing it. And it's what we call a graded exposure approach. So we titrate, you know, like the exercise right down to a tolerable level, and then start from there and start to work on that sensitivity until those menial tasks like sitting, putting a handbag on your shoulder, and even training don't become that same sort of painful stimulus anymore.
Yeah, totally. It's so funny though, because people would be like, oh, you look so fit. I'm like, dude, I can't even hold a handbag. I'm not.
Meanwhile, I look fabulous.
You did look fabulous. I love that you're okay. But
only when I'm walking next to you.
I actually was really impressed, Nathan, that you said, I actually don't know why this pain is occurring. I think this might be the case. And some practitioners might not be okay saying that because they're supposed to be the professional that knows everything, and, you know, whatever, one session and you get a proper diagnosis. But you were so comfortable with your abilities that you said, yeah, I mean, I think this could be the case, and if this doesn't work, we'll try something else. And I just found that impressive, because every other practitioner was just so sure, and then nothing worked.
I think as a professional there, you do feel that pressure to give someone that, you know, initial diagnosis and have an answer for everything. But as you rightly pointed out, when you're on the other side of that desk, you don't really care. If someone says, I don't know, but we can try this, this, and this, and explain why, that I think brings with it a whole lot of respect. You know, like that initial notion that, oh, I'm going to look dumb because I said I don't know to this person, it doesn't turn out that way at all. They kind of just go, oh, cool, he's honest enough to tell me that he doesn't know. He's not going to fudge through his teeth and, you know, like try and push something that he believes on me. It's just there's trial and error, you know, within a certain scope. We still do a really good history. We still do some orthopedic testing, and we rule out, you know, doing anything unsafe. And once we've got that, we go, well, we've got a scope of practice here to start working on your pain. And that's I think, you know, a really good thing to come at when we are talking about pain, as I mentioned at the start, not just being a physical damage, that there are all these other aspects to pain that influence someone's pain.
Actually, I've got a good example of that. My client, Cindy, who's been on board for a while now, she was in her car and all of a sudden got a migraine and tingles down her arm. And that was 4 weeks ago now. And she thought she was having a heart attack. She thought maybe that was a possibility. So she called the ambulance. And anyways, the follow-up to that was tension headaches. So the doctor put her on antidepressants for tension headaches. I don't know. And then she tried all these different painkillers. The only relief she got is if she laid down flat. And from my understanding of a tension headache is when the tension passes, the headache should also soon enough pass. But she was 3 weeks in bed laying on her back, because as soon as she would stand up again, she would get dizzy, a little bit nauseous. Then she had all these different diagnoses. Everyone was sure. The doctors were sure it was a tension headache. Then the chiro was sure that I think C4, C5 was out. And then the physio had their diet, and everyone was sure, but nothing was working. And now she went to a neurologist, I think it was, and turns out she has a fluid leak in her spine.
Wow.
Yeah. So now she's getting a proper treatment. But the problem was, instead of the GP saying, I think this is the case, but we should investigate further, it was, no, this is definitely the reason. Oh, it's been 3 weeks. You still must be under some sort of tension. Keep resting.
Let's stick to the diagnosis.
Yeah, right. So I think they were a little bit stubborn instead of saying, oh, maybe I was wrong, let's try this instead. It was just, and then that means that my client was in bed for 4 weeks. Training was out the window. She's got a wedding coming up that she hasn't made progress for. Instead of the practitioner just kind of going through the process of trial and error like you did.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly right. And also I think that there's something in there about, you know, like that stubbornness you were talking about and not wanting to admit that you don't know, and maybe just referring out to someone who might.
Yeah.
People, as much as people, as we were just talking about, they don't mind if you say they don't know, they also really don't mind and love it when you refer on to someone and they get success with someone else. As a practitioner, you kind of think, well, I need to be the answer for everything, but and that they'll never come back to me. If I refer them on to someone, I'll lose that patient forever. But people really respect those referrals and you know, like giving out, you know, like your trust to another practitioner works really, really well. And it needs to be done more than what is done in the industry at the moment, for sure, especially for those complex cases.
Yeah. Our goal as online coaches and you as a practitioner is to best help the client. And if that means that someone else can help them best, then I feel as though we have a moral obligation or a responsibility to pass them on. And
Absolutely.
if you're really struggling that badly for clients that you need to hang on to a client that you think you can't help, then maybe you're in the wrong job.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I think, you know, like the do no harm, which is sort of like the motto of most of the, you know, allied health world, it really does need to be adhered to. That's first and foremost, is do no harm. And then, you know, after that, do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Don't do anyone harm, obviously.
Yeah. Well, stretching
And part
out
of that-
someone's recovery or giving them a misdiagnosis, I would say, is not adherence.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, shall we wrap up our talk on pain and start with our segments, or do you want to talk about your osteolysis pain?
No, that's okay. Is there any take-home points we can give people, I suppose, Nath, for either like self-management of pain, modalities they can throw out the window, maybe some that they can consider, or anything you think it's worth, I suppose, like practically, what can people take from this about pain and how to manage it, please?
All right, so probably the biggest practical take-homes I would think are, you know, like this new sort of diagnosis and way we look at pain, in that pain is an experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is damage. It's not to say that the biological factors don't matter, but we as coaches and practitioners and general population need to understand that there are other factors that influence our pain and can be just as relevant, but we often just don't look down those pathways. So I'd really encourage people to, next time they get a twinge or a niggle or something like that, whether it be in the gym or not, stop and assess what their situation is that led them to that point. We often just go, was this because I didn't warm up or my core wasn't switched on? But we probably need to be thinking about, what's my stress like at the moment? Did I sleep well the night before? Has my nutrition been going really well? Have I been following you know, a well-structured training program and taking adequate rest breaks and including recovery into my strategy, and really sort of like hone down on those factors for pain, not just my form was poor or I didn't warm up properly, because they're probably not the answers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And what was the other part to, what else are we...
If there's any modalities that we could throw out of the window? The people...
Modalities we can throw out the window. I'm like, you know, I'm a big believer that everything works for someone, but it doesn't, you know, like not everything is going to work for everyone. So modalities that you might throw out the window, I probably wouldn't, I'm not going to throw people under the bus.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, cool. Sorry. As I said, I'm not going to throw people modalities under the bus, but I think there are explanations for different modalities that are no longer helpful. So things like you're out of place and we're going to crack you back into place, super unhelpful. It just doesn't happen. It's not the way that things work in the body. There's no such thing as your spine being out of alignment unless you've been in a major car crash and you've actually dislocated your spine like you would your shoulder.
Yeah.
Things just don't go out of place. But that's not to say that manipulations don't work, because as you both know, I use manipulations, but we use it as a way of mediating pain and for its neurophysiological influence on the body and how we can, help someone get out of a really sticky, painful situation. But they're not long-term solutions to someone's pain.
Yeah.
Just like any manual therapy really probably isn't. They can certainly help, and I use a lot of manual therapy, but I make sure that I try and frame my manual therapy as a short-term intervention, something that might help you get out of pain now, tomorrow, and for the next couple of days. And then implementing those long-term strategies, which is your active, rehab type interventions, improving someone's function, getting them stronger, more resilient, improving, like how well that they can self-manage their pain and those sorts of things. That's what we need to be really focusing on, not the magic bullet of treating pain with a needle or a manipulation or your world's sharpest elbow or whatever it is.
That's massive for me. I think that's a huge take home, is that we've got short-term intervention to get yourself out of immediate pain, followed by long-term intervention to prevent further pain.
Yeah, I think it's not a simply sell though, is it? Because if we just take chiropractors as an example, I know a few of them sell like 10 packs, and they sell their, adjusting of the back or their needling or something as the cure. And that's a good business decision, because the person then thinks, well, I have to do this to get out of pain. Whereas in fact, it might be 2 sessions with them and 10 sessions at home in their lounge room doing, the rehab exercises. But I can see how from a business decision, it could be tempting to make the patient think otherwise. And that might go a long way in explaining why not everyone does what you do.
And I think with that, when you're selling large packs, which I think is a bit unethical, but if you're selling someone on 10 sessions straight away, your average person, whether they went and saw someone 10 times or not, would probably be better by the time those 10 sessions was up. Like natural history takes its course. You went with a sore neck, 10 sessions later, it was better by itself anyway. So, but like that person then gets all the glory of like, I fixed you and I did it in only 10 sessions. So
That's so true.
One could also say,
take it into account.
Yeah.
I just hate the preemptive nature of that. Like, I reckon 10 it'll be the number. I'm like, does this so happen that it's 10 for everyone? Like, why is it written on your terms in like a typed form? Like, clearly it's 10 for everyone.
Yeah, it sounds like a business decision to me.
And as we've just discussed, like pain is on its own terms. We have, we can use our clinical reasoning and past history when someone presents to us with, a typical front of shoulder pain or a neck pain or lower back pain, and say, on average, you expect this to take 2 weeks or 3 months or something like that. But the way I approach it, and I think it should be done, is just on a case-by-case basis. You go in, you get some treatment, and you go away with some rehab, and then you maybe come back. Yeah, maybe you do come back for that second session, fairly quickly. And then we just kind of go from there. It's not, I'm definitely going to need to see you twice a week for, indefinitely until this is better.
It's an assessment on an assessment.
Yesterday, we recorded a podcast with a Flex Success client who had lost 20 kilos, which was awesome. And she said that before coming to Flex, she had a long list of other diets that she tried. And was it Jenny Craig on her first day? I think it was Jenny Craig. Or no, I don't think it was. Anyways, she went to one of these inductions for this new diet she was going to try. And on her first day, they tried to sign her up for a lifetime membership. And she was thinking, what do you mean? I just want to lose weight and then I no longer need to be a member anymore. But they were so sure that I guess she was going to fail and she was going to need to come back for her lifetime.
Yeah,
that they tried to sign, like, imagine going to the chiropractor with back pain. He signs you up for a lifetime of sessions.
Like said something like, you can go away from holidays and then you can come back.
You're going to have a baby and then
you
come back.
have a baby and you can come back.
It's one way of ensuring like adherence and compliance, I guess, but it's just like, it's a heavily monetized variation of that. I just think that's so unnecessary. Like, as you would know, like, you do good work with someone, and like, you know, for me, it's a much shorter time frame than what it is for you, but you might work with someone for, you know, an extended period of time. And then they get to the point where they go, well, you've taught me everything I need to know, and I can do this now because I've got all of those skills from you.
Yeah.
And really, I think as practitioners, that's what, on the allied health and pain side of things, we need to be, you know, giving people skills of how they can self-manage pain, not just, you have to come back to me every single time this happens.
Yeah.
Next time it happens, try this, this, and this. If it's still there, then come and see me and we'll have a look at it and try a different angle.
Yeah, I love
100%.
it. That's absolutely our goal. We want to create permanent positive change and make ourselves as coaches redundant. So we're trying to pass on skills as well.
And I really admire what you guys do in the industry. I'm just going to sort of interrupt you there to tell you that, because you are doing something very different to what a lot of the other people in the industry are doing. And you take, as I said, I hate this word holistic, but you do take a very holistic approach to training and nutrition, and you really encourage people to step back and take a look at things like we're talking about with pain.
Yeah.
Take a look at it from a really broad angle, and not just calories in, calories out, but you're encouraging people on many different aspects of how they can be compliant and get success in those fields. And I think it's amazing. I really, really like it.
Thank you.
It's the biopsychosocial model of nutrition.
I like it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's fantastic.
But
yeah.
in our holistic approach, there are no incense or salt lamps or crystal
That's
healing.
the misguided version of
That's
holistic.
not what Nathan means by
Yeah.
holistic.
Yes.
Which is why I hate the word holistic, because like someone goes, oh, you're a holistic practitioner. Yeah, exactly right. They expect they're going to walk into a room with, or, you know, organic salted lamps and magical oils and potions. And holistic just means looking at someone from as many different angles as you can.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you're encompassing the whole person, not how organic your elbows are.
Are your elbows organic? I don't want any elbows touching me. That's not organic. Now, we're going to start on our segments now, and we wanted to ask you if you have something worth sharing with our listeners. Of course, because we've been talking about pain and anatomy in the body, it can be relevant to that, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something funny.
Sure. Something I'd like to share is probably a book that we've mentioned before, which is called Pain Explained, which is written by a physiotherapist and a professor called Lorimer Moseley. But it's definitely where I started my journey, looking down, you know, the science of pain and that slightly sort of like, you know, more encompassing view of pain. It's a wonderful resource that's good for not just practitioners. It's written in really helpful, easy to understand language with lots of good practical, you know, tips and advice for dealing with pain, whether you are, as I said, you know, just a person dealing with pain, whether you're a coach or whether you're a therapist. It's an invaluable resource and one that's really guided my practice and, you know, changed the trajectory of how I used to treat, probably coming straight out of university, versus how I treat, you know, ongoing.
Love it. So after we did have a discussion a week before recording this podcast, you mentioned this book to us, and Dean and I are really interested. It looks like a textbook from what we can gather. Is it a textbook?
It's not really a textbook. It is just, it's quite thick, and that there are lots of different chapters, but no, it's not really a textbook. It is a book that is designed to be read, not front to back. You can flip through a chapter to something that's just relevant to you. And there are, like, you know, lots of infographics and lots of pictures. And, you know, like just neat ways of explaining pain that makes sense to people. A bit like that paper cut theory that we were talking about before, just, you know, like little anecdotes like that really help us connect with pain, because it's something that's so, it's really quite an abstract topic to talk about because we can't see pain. So having those little anecdotes of the ways that you can connect to it, they really, really help, and that will increase your understanding and your awareness of it and how we can help people.
I'm interested.
So Pain Explained by the name, I can't remember.
Pain Explained by the NOI group, NOI group, but the lead author on that is Professor Lorimer Moseley.
Yeah, we'll pop that in our show notes.
Yes, we will.
That's awesome.
Great. Yeah.
Now,
Next segment before the 3 final questions.
we are moving into the
No, we've got do you have an embarrassing gym story or any sports related event story?
That's right.
Embarrassing gym story. Wow. Well, I've
Or
definitely got a
I'm happy to take a practitioner story, like you
Yeah,
lent an elbow too difficult and farted, something like
plenty of those. They happen sort of, probably almost weekly in the treatment room. Naturally, when you're poking and prodding and turning people into pretzels and making them do uncomfortable exercises. What's that?
They're farting or you're farting?
Oh, they are. Maybe I might let a sneaky one go and blame them. No, but I've definitely, obviously being a surfer, I've more than one occasion had to do the walk of shame back up through the beach into the car park with ripped board shorts and all your junk hanging out after a particularly expressive session of surfing. I would say that's probably up there with one of the most awkward things you can do. Walk past a beach full of people all the way back up to the car with nothing but your dignity in your hands, basically, and everything else showing.
I would swim for a while.
I would put my board in front of me and walk with it, kind of like long ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one to do, but then you're still exposed from the behind, and you got to bend over and get up and get down. It's
You just
not the most
constantly
graceful
walk and
thing.
just wave to people like, yep, this is happening. Thank you.
How does one rip their board shorts from front to back while surfing?
You get into some pretty interesting positions while surfing. There's a lot of mobility and like squat position required, I guess. And sometimes, definitely for me, what you think you're going to do and what you are actually doing are two very different things. So in your head, you're leaning back into a really nice top turn, a big carve, you're going to spray a whole bunch of water everywhere, but really you're just crumpling into a mess, and your left leg's going to the right and your right leg's going to the left, and before you know it, your board shorts are upside down and inside out.
Do you think there's a market for board shorts with elastane?
Well, they already exist.
Do they?
I've already got it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Get on that, then.
Yeah, but they'd still go pencil it up.
Do you think so? Even with
Yeah.
elastane?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. They're well and truly out on the market.
Okay.
Bike pants surfing, new thing.
Yeah.
That's not a good look.
Surfing.
Yeah.
No? Not my bag.
Yeah.
No pun intended. All right. Now,
the final round.
Yeah, the final round. If you were arrested without any explanation, what would your family and friends assume you did?
Oh, it's probably a bit embarrassing. They would assume that I was probably, what do you call it? Like drunk in public or something like that. I reckon they would just assume. What's that?
Drunk and disorderly.
Drunk and disorderly. There you go. But I was being some sort of public nuisance, especially if my fiancée Tash had anything to say about it. She would assume that, and she's always speaking about that. A couple of drinks under my belt, and my confidence starts to come out, and I start pushing people's buttons, and it would definitely be a bit of drunk and disorderly. They would assume for me.
I look forward to having a couple of drinks with you then, because all I have to do is have a sight of someone's drink. I'm like that much of a lightweight that I see someone drinking and I get drunk. And I feel
You
like
look at it and you're tipsy.
I'm a loud drunk.
She's an alcohol sniffer. That's it.
Stay away from the scotch.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right. Next one is, if you could solve any mystery in this world, and it can be any genre whatsoever, what would it be?
Any mystery? Oh, God, it would have to be like the meaning of life, wouldn't it? Like, isn't that what everyone wants to know? I'd love to know what we're here for. Actually, maybe even like to better that point, how did we get here? That's what I'd like to know.
So do you subscribe to Darwinism? Do you think that we just evolved from bacteria? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm not a creationist by any stretch of the imagination. I would assume that we slowly evolved from one organism to the next until we ended up where we are today. I think given how adaptable our bodies are, it only makes sense. Like, you do a whole bunch of lifting weights, you get strong. If your body's exposed to a whole different natural environment, then of course it's going to change, like what it needs to do to survive. So I do believe that we probably were along the lines of that, Darwinism.
I do love though when people are like, well, we haven't really evolved much in the last 100 years. I'm like, yeah, it's 100 years.
It's like one person's lifetime.
Try a couple of million years, mate. We'll take a couple of steps back there.
But do you have some questions around that, if that's the mystery that you want solved?
Do I have some questions around
evolution? If
around
the mystery you want solved is how we got, no, you said the meaning of why we're here, didn't you?
the meaning of why we're here? I often, it's not really to do with that, but I've often got questions about how far does space go? Like, where's the edge of our known, whatever it is? Like, do we just hit a wall? What happens there? Where do we go when we die?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things are what sort of sometimes keep me up at night.
So there's a Joe Rogan podcast with Richard Dawkins that discusses where we go when we die, which you might be interested in listening to. I believe that we just become part of the earth because we can't create or destroy energy, and our energy just becomes the earth's energy. Yeah,
there's an epic quote. Yeah, I think it's even on a Rogan podcast too, from Neil deGrasse Tyson. And it was a debate around whether or not you would be cremated versus buried. And always shared the same opinion. It's well, I probably would get cremated because less space, we don't really need to be in the ground. What's the point?
I'm taking up real estate.
But then Neil deGrasse Tyson was well, if you are, if you're on the notion of that, as an organism, we continually evolve and we give back to the land and blah, 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 energy sort of ever, just essentially exchanging itself from one thing to another. He's the great thing about being buried is that you become the energy to another source to then create new life.
You feed worms.
And I was like, God damn, man, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you're the fella. I'm not buried then.
Bury me then, absolutely. And that's the way that you think about it. It's that we're just the sum of all our parts, and then when we die, we just go to nothing. What happens to our consciousness? Does the consciousness live on, or does that die with us?
Stop. This is too deep, and this is I can't answer that question, and I hate having unanswered questions. So stop it. I actually really love these philosophical questions. I find it hard to switch them off because I love them so much. So
there we go.
Plus, they go forever.
They go forever. They do.
All right, let's go to a really serious question then, Liz.
All right.
Finish it up, wrap it up. And Nathan, a would you rather?
Oh no, my would you rather was right here, and I've lost it. All right, Nick, cut this bit out while I'm looking. I got it. All right, so my would you rather. Would you rather have no nipples or have 3 nipples?
Ooh. Well, given that the male nipple probably serves 0 purpose, and
it can let you know.
Probably just rather. Sorry?
It can let you know when you're cold.
So can the other 1,000 goosebumps on your arm. Let me one big brown.
Look at the rest of my biological mechanisms. Yeah. Wow. Well, I wouldn't be opposed to having 3 nipples or no nipples. Well, I guess it's probably weirder to have no nipples, isn't it? I'd have 3 nipples. Fuck it.
Where would they be then? Are you going even 3? Are you going a double with a single? Or for anyone that's not watching this on YouTube, I am pointing at my chest while I'm tweaking them. How do you?
I reckon a double and a single. So at least one side's sort of a little bit normal, and then you've just got one that's a two-dogger.
One on top of the other, or one next to the other?
I was imagining for symmetry that they're all in a line. Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
1, 2, and then the third one over to the side. Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that.
You should get. Do you know what an industrial bar is in the ear?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you should get an industrial bar through both of those nipples side by side.
To link all of them. On that topic, I will say that I'm often surprised at the amount of people that do sport nipple piercings, like blokes that obviously they don their shirt when they come in. I'm like, wow, you've got a nipple piercing. Got them both done, the big bars. No other lead-in apart from just these big glaring nipple piercings.
I think my brother's a straighty 180 and had both of his nipples done. And then people that do it with sport, then they end up getting them hit, and then they have one nipple bigger than the other, and I'm like, man, this is just too different.
Nasty.
Yeah, it's a real sort of late 90s trend, wasn't it? Like the Peter Andre sort of
just APAC.
So I think that if you're to have your nipple pierced, it's weird to have both. And the left one is the normal one to pierce. And I think I was having a discussion with Dean about was it you about nipple piercings? And you assumed that when you get your nipples done, it's like getting your ears pierced. You get both. Was that me and you?
No, I kept just one and left as well,
Well,
for some reason.
I'd like to put it out there that a double nipple piercing is weird, and stop listening to this podcast because you're a freak if you have a double nipple piercing.
It is pretty weird. It's very brave, like to do the double. It's
yeah, I'm less weird about a double nipple.
I think it's weird.
Mm.
I think it's weird. So Nathan, tell us, where can our listeners find you if they want to find you?
Right. So they can follow me on Instagram. I am at thesurfing.osteopath. You can find me in my clinical practice, which is Universal Health and Performance in Burleigh, and that's universal-health.com.au is my website. I do all online bookings. If you want to come in and see me and chat about your pain, or let me help you sort of decipher what's good and what's bad pain, then that's all the places that you can find me.
Perfect. Love it. Now,
Awesome.
Dean, what have we got going on at Flex to wrap it up?
Absolutely nothing. We've cooked ourselves.
Yeah, nothing. We've been on holidays. As always,
You've reached your pinnacle here. It's only downhill. Sorry, guys.
I know. We're going to retire. I hope you've gained something helpful and learned how to be a little bit less shit from today's podcast. And thank you for your time, Nathan. It's been great.
Cheers, mate.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me, guys. It's been awesome.
Bye.